Welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is why I disagree with the Crosstalk episode of Friday the 2nd of December. And the heading of the show was NATO doubles down. Basically, they questioned the existence of NATO, and NATO should have been disbanded. And NATO is just looking for a purpose. And NATO is basically threatening the security architecture in Europe. And Russia cannot accept that. And NATO has been expanding for the last 30 years and so on. And it's now become a threat for Russia, etc., the old narrative that we all know. Now, I cannot agree with that. I'm sorry. You have to stand a little bit back. And the way I would like to do it, so I would show you a map of the Western world. And here you can see the Western world as we know it. It consists mainly out of North America, and then Europe, the Scandinavian countries, and then Australia and New Zealand. And we always talk about the rest of the world that is now becoming multipolar, and that is the white areas. Now think a little bit back into history, and think about what you are seeing on your screen. The Western world has always dominated the whole world, the whole map as you see it. That is what they have done. From the Roman times, before even the Roman times, the Venetians, you name it, history always shows that the Western world was the strongest in technology, the most aggressive, the most expansive, and conquered the world. Initially by normal slave trade and so on, and later on by colonization. And we can here refer to the Spaniards, and then the Netherlands, and then the British, and, well, that was the formal colonization. And then we had the informal colonization. After the Second World War, the Bretton Woods agreement was signed, treaty or whatever you want to call it, and the American dollar was made the world reserve currency. And since the American economy was the strongest in the world and wasn't destroyed by the Second World War, it featured the dominant position in the world. And thereby, by the use of the US dollar and the strong economy, America indirectly colonized the rest of the world. They controlled the white areas as you have seen on the map. And you can argue about that, but unfortunately, in reality, that is what happened. In any country that resisted that dominance, that indirect enslavement and colonization, was either subject, they did a lot of other things, was either subject to, by the American NGOs, into color revolutions, coup d'etats. Well, before they even did that, they probably wouldn't implement sanctions, but after the sanction would be the economic war. After the economic war, there would be the NGOs and the overthrow of the government and installation of a puppet regime. All these things were complicated, integrated, various methods of ensuring that that country is compliant with the American hegemony and control. And if that didn't work, then they would start military exercises. Military operations, and then subjugate that country militarily. And this is how it has worked for the last 70, 80 years. Now remember again, just look at the map carefully. That's a huge part of the map, and that is how it has operated. And then you have also understand that that map represents NATO. That is what NATO is. So NATO is the biggest military alliance in the world. The only other military alliance that you get is the Russian ones, and that has about 5 to 6 countries. That's all. NATO is the biggest military alliance. It covers the whole Western nations, the Western world, who has dominated the rest of the world for the last how many years? Centuries, and recently decades. So NATO is not going to be destroyed and disbanded. There's no reason for that. Anybody that now doesn't agree with the West has to do with NATO. Depending on how NATO wants to be, how aggressive and use that military, it has the capability to wage war on a huge scale. America has about, say, 360 million people, and I think Europe has about 420, but don't quote me on those numbers. But in total, it's about 780 million people. Together, they control more or less half or maybe half of the world's GDP, economic activities. It possesses most of the technology. It contains the biggest military or army in the world. Yes, the Europeans are limited in their military contributions to NATO. Sure. Why? Because they never needed to upgrade it. Because America was also the most dominant party in the NATO. And the Americans dictated what had to be done and who will do it, and they will usually take that position. And there's also a reason for that, because the biggest military industrial complex is in America. And that's a huge part of the economy and GDP. That is how it works. But this missing the European sector as a weak block that shouldn't be taken into consideration is a huge mistake. If you look at, say, just for the sake of the Second World War, I don't like to do it, but I will do it in this case. It's only 5 years that the war goes on. How many weapons have been produced? How much ammunition has been produced in that 5 years? How many people have been killed in those 5 years? How many destruction has happened in that 5 years? So telling me that no country in NATO can ramp up military production to a state where it is viable or required to fight a war, conventional war against Russia or China, or both of them together, cannot happen. That is what they did in the Second World War. America mobilized their population, the industry, and that's why they got rich, and that's why they got that huge economic boost, and that is why the dollar was made the dominant world currency. So, I made some notes. I don't know if I'm going to even discuss all the notes. But that is what NATO is, and NATO is not going to give up. So forget about that. It's not going to happen. And when you think about European security framework with Russia, well, Russia currently is a threat to the whole Western world. The same with China. It's a threat to the whole existence of the Western world in raping the rest of the world. These two countries are standing up against hegemony, or, no, not hegemony, that's actually a wrong term, to the empire of the West. They are going to change the rule and drive back the influence and break the influence that that empire has on the rest of the world. That is what Russia and China stands for. And that is what they are trying to do with creating another multiple polar world. Now, if the multipolar world is being created, then what is NATO going to, well, if I refer to NATO, I refer to the rest of the Western world. What is the NATO going to do? It threatens their existence of dominance. They don't feel like being competitive. That's not what they want. They want to control and exploit the rest of the world and subdue the rest of the world into slavery for their own benefit and their way of life. That is why it is semi-existential, the war in Ukraine. Because if they lose in Ukraine, then one has to think about what's the next step. How are the Western world, Ukraine in itself doesn't matter, but the conflict does matter. And if NATO has to stand back, then he has to ask what other methods he can do to prevent this onslaught of Russia and China against the way of life of the Western world. How are they going to stop it? And they thought about Taiwan. And they thought about maybe North Korea. Maybe, but I don't think that's an issue. But they will start color revolutions in other parts of the eastern countries, like we had, I think, now in Thailand, in Iran and all this other stuff. They will keep on doing these clandestine type of disruptions. That is what they will do, and that is what is important. But they can always have a standstill and a new Cold War in Europe, and it won't really, Russia's not going to go to war against Europe unless it feels threatened. And the Balkan countries and Poland and so on are not going to really threaten him unless the Americans put some missiles in there. So if they want to have a frozen conflict, then just don't position nuclear weapons in Europe, which is against any case against the treaties. So that's one side of NATO. And they refer to Stoltenberg and those are all puppets. Those are administrative people that are told what to say. They have no influence, and if you listen to them, then don't even take them seriously because it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't, like I talk about Ursula von der Leyen's comments about the 100,000 Ukrainians dead. You cannot take that as a reliable source of information. I mean, I read an article, she's now being blamed, well, not blamed, but she's people are up in arms in Ireland because she has compared the Irish resistance against Britain in the same way as Ukraine against Russia, and now the Irish are angry with her. Well, if she's saying things like that, then surely you cannot believe her. You cannot take it to heart and say, "Hey, that's a reliable source." No, you dismiss her. From a military analysis. Political side is a totally different game. And then they still talk about, the Western weapons, the West is running out of ammo, running out of military equipment, doesn't have the manufacturing capability. Andre talks about 4 to 5 years that experts know in America to ramp up production. It's going to take 4 to 5 years to ramp up the economy. What I mentioned is bullcrap. I've mentioned World War II. The war was only 5 years long. But still, America ramped up very quickly. So why can't they do it now? Let's say I'm going to produce the 155 artillery round. It consists out of 3 items. The standard one, not the other one. A cast iron hull or shell, an explosive inside, which can be a composite, well, not propellant, I don't know what you call explosives, but propellants, I knew they were composite components. But in any case, then and you have a trigger mechanism, the fuse. So there's only 3 items. The casting is not a big thing. Here in South Africa, I will produce you a lot of shell casting if you want. And we have a small industry. And we have very few foundries. So in America, where they have a lot more foundries, a lot more technology, I'm sure I will push out those artillery holes like nothing. 1,000 per day, more. And that's only one factory, and there are multiple foundries. Then you have to look at the casting of the explosives. Well, you had the space shuttle program in America. And those booster rockets were all solid propellants. That means you have huge mixing facilities of mixing explosives in safe environment. So you can fill those, again, those rounds, thousands per day, no problem. You can manufacture all the raw materials because most of our stuff was imported from America, what we didn't make ourselves. But I worked in the arms factory, and before I started there were 3,000 personnel, and when I started there were about 700 because we were downgraded. And 90% of the manufacturing facilities were mothballed. So here in South Africa, 90% of our propellant manufacturing plant is mothballed, which probably is now 100%. Well, we made these multiple rocket launcher missiles by the thousands. We produce 155 artillery rounds. So if we can do it, then surely American can do it. Fairly easy. Give me 6 months, max. Give me 6 months, max, and I'll produce you thousands of these things a day. This is not rocket science. And if you really notice that, then what has really been delivered to the Ukrainians in terms of armament? The surplus material, the surplus equipment, the things that are not used anymore. The Americans and the Europeans had 2 choices. Either I scrap this stuff and put it onto the scrap yard and melt the metal and sell it like that, sell it for scrap, or sell it at a nice price to Ukraine and make a little bit of money out of that. That is what happened. They didn't use their latest technology. They used the scrap, the surplus. There's a website that tells you everything that has been delivered to Ukraine. Every single weapon, by whom, when, where, and so on. And according to the information I just looked up, it's about 800,000 to 155 artillery rounds. You want to tell me that the American army military has only 1 million rounds of 155? Only. No. How big is America? How big is the army? How many cannons do they have? How many ammunition depots do they have? I mean, come on. In South Africa, we have a lot of them. And they were at one stage all full of ammunition. 155s, multiple launch rockets. I don't know. Get this off your dingers. It's a question of commitment. How committed is NATO and America to resolve the war in Ukraine or not? How much do they think it's going to be existential? What are they prepared to risk? And then they talk about the European 10-year plan of refixing Ukraine or rebuilding Ukraine. And then these guys have used dreams. It's a dream. It means nothing. It's not that they say it's going to take them 10 years. It's not going to say they're going to keep on this conflict for 10 years. It means nothing. Nada. Zilch. It's just that some people said, oh, okay, Ukraine still exists here. Hey, there's a possibility that will be built up, and then we make millions in the rebuilding of Ukraine. And yeah, we're going to say, you know, what I do agree with him is that Ukraine is a huge money-making scheme. Money-making scheme extraordinaire. The governments are getting rid of their junk, scrap metal, for a higher price than scrap metal. So they're making good use of all old stock, which is sometimes difficult to destroy. It's very difficult to destroy old explosives and ammunition. Special procedure to be written, special procedure to be followed. It's one big pain in the butt. So they got rid of that nicely. This thing that they probably gave to Ukraine, we're not the latest generation, we're probably the first generation that they still use for Afghanistan. The javelins, why didn't they work? It's probably the first generations of javelins. Yeah, okay, sometimes I want to actually make a point. So the harpoon, no, is it the harpoon? Well, the latest missile America wanted to send, not the rocket assisted one, the other one. It was developed in the 60s. But what nobody talks about, and nobody makes the effort of Googling it, those things have been probably 5 times upgraded and renewed. Those are not the 1960 models anymore. Those are the 1990s and the latest update, that anti-air defense missile system. All these weapons have been upgraded at one stage, but now they become obsolete because they are replaced by newer models. It's the same what the Russians are doing. They are first using all their old stock. They're a little bit more clever. They use the stock for the application where it's suitable. So when they use their T-62 tanks, they use it for a certain purpose, and that is 100% fine. They don't put their T-62 up in a battle against a T-90 or whatever. But they are using a hell of a lot of old ammunition and equipment. Any further, there's a principle, man. FIFO and LIFO, last in, first out. FIFO, first in, first out, but it's the LIFO one. And I don't understand, do these people not, you know, Andre makes these comments, and I don't know. And I definitely don't need 4 to 5 years to ramp up production. Give me the money. Give me $1 million, billion dollar. Give me $1 billion. I will transform South African arms industry in probably 6 weeks. Not 6 weeks, 6 months, max. Whatever you need, gonna roll out, first ones we're gonna roll out in 6 months. Shells definitely on there. All tested, all to quality control. To spec. But let me just have a look. What was the other thing to discuss? Oh yeah. Yeah, then unfortunately Andre got a little bit spooked and so on when he referred to Ursula von der Leyen's 100,000 Ukrainians a troop, and you calculate that, and he got the numbers a little bit messed up and so on, but that's not the point. Now, Andre always talks about the real war. This is a real war against a peer. No, this is not real war. These are skirmishes. These are small-time battles. You want to talk real war? I'm going to do it again. I don't want to do it. World War II. I've mentioned, all the Arab people are always mentioning our day in offensive. But I'm going to mention as well. 400,000 men died. 400,000 men died in, I think, 6 weeks. That is war. That's a horror of war. That is, Andre, real war. Not skirmishes. Losing 30 men in an attack is nothing. That's not war, that's a skirmish. And I even doubt that numbers in any case, because I've discussed it in the videos as well. UAV footages, if you study them properly, you will notice that a lot of those people didn't die. And the Russian Military Defense Daily Report, I reject that as total bullshit. If you can tell me how the Russians can shoot down 250 aircrafts when Ukraine only had half of that at the beginning of the conflict, then, well, they don't believe him again. Anyways, so, you know, what is the future for Ukraine? They say Ukraine is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah, all right, they lost the Donbass. Yeah, that's all right. Then they lost Zaporizhzhia and the Kherson Oblast as well. Yes, they did that. But as I showed you in a video where I made a time lapse, the initial phase of the SMO, Russia conquered a lot of area. And that is true. But if you look at the time lapse, then you will notice that a lot of those areas have been recovered and reoccupied by Ukrainian forces. So what has actually happened is that Ukraine lost a lot of territory, yes, that's correct, and then regained a lot of territory. No one is talking about that. Nobody looks at the map, nobody looks at the event. We're all zooming in like here instead of seeing the bigger picture. What was oh yeah, I did agree with some of the stuff, yeah. Yeah, I get. Yeah, they talked about the fundraising. So we occupy this town, and it's a fundraising event. And Zelensky is called what? The mother of all charities, or something like that. Can't remember. Yes, it's a money-making scheme. If you listen to some of the talks and so on by veterans, American soldiers that were there, that came back, and they tell them their horrific stories. The first thing that they always say is that, firstly, there is corruptness all over. Weapons come to the front and then they are loaded into trucks and then they disappear. And they're taken off. And we know that the Ukraine was the most corrupt country before the SMO in Europe. And if I remember, you know, in the old days after the collapse of the Soviet Union, a lot of Soviet armament and ammunition was stored in Ukraine. And all of those things were sold on the black market and sent to Africa and other areas of conflicts. And, well, money is disappearing. So Zelensky has discussed that he accumulated more than $800 million since he became president, and so forth and so forth. Ukraine is a money-making scheme. The elite that control everything don't care about the lives of their population. They don't care about Ukraine. And even some of the Ukrainians know that, and that's why they also are corrupt and stealing the weapons and selling it on. Everybody's looking after themselves because they know Ukraine is going to be destroyed and it's going to be occupied to a certain level, and all the pro-Russian oblasts will then join Russia. So the fate of Ukraine is already known by now. We all know that. But it's just a matter of time. But for the other people, they also know that. But they don't care. They only care about money. War is always profitable for certain people. And it's only the stupid peasants that believe in patriotism and sacrifice and you've got to die for your country and all this other bullshit story. They are the dumb sheep that are led to the slaughter, believing all their crap. In the world, there's only one thing, there are two things. Money and power. And they are basically effectively the same. Money, 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 money. Yes, there are sometimes good intentions. I do agree with that. But those are the exceptions on the rule. And what I wanted to say, oh yeah. So another thing is that now, when you look at the war, so what's going to happen in Ukraine? So if you look at some of the maps, you see a lot of Ukrainian forces on the one side. They are fairly distributed. But there are 700, well, not anymore, but there are 700,000 men that are supposed to be part of the army. And not all of them are fighting soldiers. A lot of them are logistics and stuff like that. Usually the majority. And Andre also talks about this 545,000 Russians that are now on this. But again, a lot of them are for support and logistics. A lot of weapon is put to the front. Yes, they're going to push it. But the question is how is this going to really do it? So are they going to go with slow, grinding action? Conquering one town by the next town, by the next town, by the next town. That is how they're going to save most of their soldiers' life. If they decide to storm the Ukrainian defenses, then they're going to lose a lot more Russian soldiers. That is unfortunately how it works. And then they will crack the Ukrainians and they sort of have a blitzkrieg operation. So the question is the Russians going to do a blitzkrieg strategy, or are they going to continue with the slow grinding, as Andre likes to call it? That is the question we all have to ask yourself. And currently it's all a semi-lull. There are regional battles like Bakhmut and so on, which are important in order to protect, not Bakhmut, a little bit south, in order to protect the daily shelling of Donetsk, which should have been a priority a long time ago, but nobody in the Russian defense decided that is so. But that's not the point. That's just my personal view. So if the Russians continue with their grinding with it, then the war is going to carry on a year, 2 years, 3 years. It's going to take on a long time. The Ukrainian forces won't collapse because it's a slow process. And the longer it carries on, the more the Western nations, if they still support Ukraine, just remember if, then they will commit themselves and ramp up production and deliver what is necessary. And you don't need a tank to kill another tank. Today's modern warfare, you have anti-tank weapons. So you can kill another tank that storms to you. You don't need a tank, but it would have been nice. A tank, has a lot of features and has a lot of applications. It's not only a tank-to-tank battle. And it would be nice to have artillery support. Yes, it would have been. But if you are a defensive, then those things are not that important as if you had an offensive position. But I don't know what goes on, and neither do you, and nobody else knows what's going on. It's like I said, in the daily Russian report, they are shooting down every second day another aircraft, and they are tallying the numbers, and it's double what the Ukrainians should have had. They are destroying every time tanks and APCs and troop carriers, and every time there's some more. And every time there's some more. So when are the Ukrainians really running out of this stuff? So nobody of us really knows. Neither Andre, neither me, neither anybody else, neither Ursula von der Leyen. The only people that really know is the Russian command and the Ukrainian command. And the Americans. In any case. That's my story for today. I cannot agree with these guys. I'm sorry. I'm starting to doubt myself because I disagree with so many people that I think, hey, if so many people think otherwise, am I then wrong or what? But I cannot see the logic in there. But we all make mistakes. So if you don't agree with me, that's fine. In any case. So if you like what you heard, Subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, spread the word, and until next time, cheers.